Year 5s and 6s. I hope you had a really lovely Easter and done lots of fun things and enjoyed the sunshine. So it's the start of the summer term, and myself and Mr. Clark thought it'd be really nice if we could do something that we do in school, and that's share a book. So every day we'll be bringing you a next instalment of the book, and the book that we've chosen for this term is No Ballet Shoes in Syria by Catherine Burton. So just so you know what it's about, I'll read you the blurb off the back. So it says, Aya is 11 years old and has just arrived in Britain with her mum and baby brother seeking asylum from a war in Syria. When Aya stumbles across the local ballet class, the formidable dance teacher spots her exceptional talent and believes that Aya has the potential to earn a prestigious ballet scholarship. But at the same time, Aya and her family must fight to be allowed to remain in the country, to make a home for themselves and to find Aya's father separated from the rest of the family during their journey from Syria. Wow. Okay, so let's start at chapter 1. Aya could hear music floating through the walls and a woman's voice. 1, 2, porte les bras. Lift those arms, girls. 3, 4, straighter. Yes. 5, 6, elongate. The notes of the piano seemed to trickle down through Aya's limbs, and her fingertips moved involuntarily towards the tune that tinkled through the stuffy air. The music stopped. Aya wriggled her toes and glanced around. The community centre was crowded, a jumble-sale collection of people talking in a bustle of different languages. Hot sun spilled through dusty windows, and the room smelled of soup and unwashed clothing. And sadness, Aya thought. She sighed and shifted in her seat. The music started again, and Aya glanced upwards. The piano notes were coming from somewhere close by, upstairs. If she closed her eyes really tight and focused hard enough, she could almost imagine herself back home in the dance studio in Aleppo, with the heat of her limbs and the white hot sun falling through the skylight and the aromas of the city trickling through the windows, dusty streets, car fumes, incense. She smiled as she remembered standing at the bar, tracing her pointed toe through the series of ronde la jambes, recalling the dust that sometimes trickled across the floor and drove Madame Belleville mad. Anyone looking at Aya at that moment would have seen a small girl who looked much younger than her 11 years, holding a sleeping toddler in her arms. She had her eyes closed and a curious expression danced over her face as her small foot traced circles on the grubby floorboards. A headscarf covered her black hair, and the clothing she was wearing was too big for her. Leggings sagged over her skinny limbs, and an old dress, which might perhaps have been one of her mother's, hung limply over her tiny frame. And yet there was something about the way she sat, the bird-like tilt of her pinched face, that made her seem as if she belonged somewhere different. The sounds of music stopped once more, and Aya wriggled on the hard plastic seat. She was hungry and Musa was heavy in her arms. The music had made her feel fidgety and restless, and something else, but she couldn't quite find a word for. She shook her head determinedly and sat up straight. She needed to be focused today to help Mama. How long do you think it will be? She asked the woman sitting next to her, who just shrugged. Aya wasn't sure if she'd even understood. She glanced around. She'd been waiting for 3 hours to talk to a caseworker, a young man with a beard and tired-looking eyes who sat behind a makeshift desk, papers and files piled around him. Right now he was talking to Mr. and Mrs. Masood, an old couple from the hostel who told Aya that they'd come from Damascus. Aya heard the words: application for asylum, appeal, lawyers, undocumented, hearing. Same old story, she muttered to Musa. Right, Moose? Over and over, wherever we go. Musa shifted in his deep sleep, making funny little sucking noises that made Aya want to squeeze him tight. You sound like a baby rabbit, Moose, she muttered, planting a kiss on her brother's grubby, tear-stained face. His hair was damp with sweat, his fingers clasped tightly around Aya's thumb. She remembered the first time she'd held him, that wave of love she had felt then, the feeling she'd had that she would never let anything happen to him, ever. Don't worry, Moosey, she whispered into his damp cheeks. Aya's here. Ira's going to sort it all out. Promise. Mumma was sitting next to her. She looked tired and far away. It won't be long now, Mumma, Aya said. But Mumma didn't reply. She just kept staring up at the dusty windows, as if she could see something through them that Aya could not. You okay, Mumma? Aya asked. You hungry? I can get you some food. There's soup today. But Mumma said nothing. Just then the door to the community centre swung open and music spilled into the room. Louder now, a quicker piece was playing, and Aya found her toes tapping out the beat on the floor. 1, 2, 3, squeeze 2, 3. To the bar 2, 3, and photograph. Lovely, ladies. Aya held her breath for a second. Photograph, she muttered, half to herself and half to Musa. Madame Belliver liked to say that too. Photograph. It meant moment of stillness, a pause, catching hold of the music and waiting for it. The notes of the dancer suspended in time, hovering in the air, just for a second. Suddenly, Aya couldn't sit still a moment longer. She glanced at the queue of people in front of them. It would be ages before they were called. She could slip out, just for a moment, to go and look. Mumma, I'm just going out. I won't be long, I promise. I'll be back to help, and I'll get you some soup and bread. You need to eat, okay? Mumma turned and nodded. But she seemed to only have half heard. I will make sure she eats properly today, Aya said to herself, and rubbed her temples the way Dad used to when she got one of her headaches. And I'll talk to the caseworker and get everything sorted out. Then Mumma will be able to relax, get better, be herself again. Aya carefully uncurled her little brother's fingers from her own and laid them down gently on the battered pusher that Sally, the nice young volunteer who ran the centre, had found for them. Then she stood up and did a little spin on the spot, which for a moment made Mr. Abdul, sitting opposite, think of a curling autumn leaf falling through the air. But Aya wasn't aware of being leaf-like. As she made her way over to the doorway, she just needed to shake off that fidgety feeling that the music had sent trickling through her limbs before she burst. Chapter 2. It was a relief to be out there, away from the smell of the old clothes, boiled vegetables, and that other smell, which Aya had decided was sadness. Once upon a time, she'd have said that sadness didn't have a smell. Now it was more familiar than the fast-fading sense of home, worse than the smell of Moose's stinky nappies, worse than Dad's smelly socks, worse than the boys' changing room at school. Though she wouldn't have thought that was possible a year ago. Aya stretched her arms high above her head and looked around the lobby. Manchester Welcomes Refugees was housed in the community centre, in a run-down area of the city where crumbling red brick terraces crouched in the shades of dying and derelict tower blocks. So different from the tree-lined streets and sunlit avenues of Aleppo before the war. There were posters on notice boards advertising all the things that went on there. Aya ran her eyes over the confusing words: Latin and Ballroom Club, all ages welcome, Horticultural Society. She sounded out the syllables. Zumba Gold. What was Zumba anyway? Pilates for mindfulness. She had no idea what that meant either. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table with Dad, teaching her English, laughing at the strange sounding syllables. She could still see Dad's smiling face, the dark almond eyes, the hint of grey in the stubble on his chin, the small scar on his cheek from where he'd had chicken pox as a child. She pushed that thought away quickly. She couldn't think about Dad, not if she was going to keep it together. The music was much clearer out here, and Aya could hear the woman's voice, speaking English with a slight foreign lilt to it. Ladies, are we swans on the lake or ugly ducklings? Let me see grace, let me see elegance. Lovely. The music, the voice, the soft thud of feet moving in time seemed to tug at something inside Aya, like the strings on a tightly bound package, loosening memories she normally buried deep, deep inside. Arms, ladies, arms, and fingers. Feel it in every sinew, right to the tips of your pinky fingers. I couldn't help it. She wanted to look. She made her way to the staircase and up out of the little lobby. There were benches all scattered with collection of bags and coats and items of clothing. One door seemed to lead to a small office, another led to a fire escape. Then there was a pair of white doors with a little window on the top, through which the music was coming. Aya hesitated. It had been so long since she danced, a whole lifetime ago, another life almost. Standing on tiptoe, she could make out the rather battered-looking dance studio, mirrors all along one wall, and a bar stretching the whole way round. A group of young girls were lined up, dressed in black leotards with pink socks and satin shoes. Each girl had her hair piled up into a bun. Though some were neater than others, I noticed as she watched their legs and arms moving in time to the music. Straight up like a chocolate finger, ladies. No wiggly waggling as you close, the teacher was saying. Now you can all take your hands off the bar, except Miss Dotty, who is still seeming a little drunk today, I think. Aya watched as the girl in front of the line, who had skin like melted chocolate and a lopsided bun and a mischievous twinkle in her eye, wobbled a little more precariously. The girl, who must be Dotty, put her hand on the bar to steady herself, biting her lip as if to stop giggling. Now squeeze those bottoms and make your necks nice and long like giraffes, the teacher was saying, walking down the row of girls. Very nice, Cara, she said to a slender blonde dancer with limbs like snowy branches. No seesawing, Lilla Ella, to a small girl with mousy hair. Don't be making the examiner feel seasick, Grace. This was to a tall girl with sloping shoulders and glasses perched on her nose. There was no sand on the floor and the sky through the windows was English blue, not Syrian gold. But otherwise, Aya could have been back in Aleppo, back home, before the war, before everything. And it could have been her own classmates lined up on the bar. Samia, Kimi, Nadia, Nuda, the twins, who always did everything together, even going to the toilet. What had happened to the twins? The teacher turned to Aya to see her properly now. She was old, very old, and tiny, with a snowy white head of hair piled up into a bun, and a face round and bright like a wrinkled apple. In a flowing black dress and shiny red character shoes on her tiny feet, she looked each little girl up and down with her bright violet blue eyes, lifting an arm here, touching a head there, just as Madame Belliver had always used to do. Make sure you are speaking with your hands, your toes, your eyes, my dancers, she was saying. But Dotty, do tell your eyes to mind their P's and Q's. Just then the little girl called Dotty glanced towards the door and caught sight of Aya. A quizzical expression flitted across her face as she held Aya's glance. She smiled just for a second. It looked as if she was going to laugh. The final notes of the music tinkled out of the bar exercise and it came to an end. The girls relaxed into an easy chatter, reaching for their water bottles, sorting out hair and pulling up socks as they made their way to the middle of the floor. Only the girl called Dotty kept her gaze trained on Aya. And as she took a glug of water, she winked and grinned. Aya smiled back. For the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible. Aleppo, Syria. Aya barely remembered how the war had begun. She must have been 6, 7, maybe. She did have memory of Dad watching demonstrations on the TV one evening. He had some of his friends from the hospital over and they were talking, arguing about recent events, the protests on the streets of the capital, the arrests, the fighting. They didn't seem to agree about what was going on. She heard words like political reforms, civil rights, and release of prisoners, arrests, words she really didn't understand, but had ugly shapes to them. They were angry at the president, Mumma had explained. Aya wasn't sure if she was talking about the crowds of protesters or about Dad's friends. Over the next few days, she stared at the images on the news. Fighting in the streets of the capital, Damascus. Protesters waving banisters, clashing with police. Shots fired, blood on the streets. Why are they so angry, Dada, she asked. They want to make Syria a better country. Habitai, said Dad, rubbing his grey stubble on his chin thoughtfully. So why are the police hurting them? Dad sighed. Perhaps people have different versions of better. She looked hard at him. His almond-shaped eyes looked trouble, and he was not smiling. Dad always smiled, even when he came home exhausted from a long shift at the hospital. He always had a smile for his Aya, for his little dancing girl. Will the fight come here, she asked, to Aleppo? I hope not, Habiti, she said. I hope not, but if it does, I will keep you and Mama safe, I promise. So there you go, that's chapter 1 and 2. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you come back to listen to the next instalment tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye.